Now it is that much awaited time of the year in which I, for once, live by your calendar and do a recap of 2024 and tell you the best books I have read. I have decided to make 3 different lists this year. One is for poetry, one for philosophy, and the one that I'm gonna make now on fiction. It's an interesting year in terms of lists because most of the books on each list, at least the first half, were not books that moved me too much. But then the second half was compiled by the best books I have read in my life. There is, I think, at least there is 3 books that I have read this year that have become some of my favorite books of all time. Somehow, the rest of the list is only there to be in contrast with that fact. Not all of it. There's a lot of really good books, as you will see, but definitely, this wasn't the case before all the years that I have put any book on a list that I wasn't completely convinced about. It is this year though. So I'm gonna start because we've had some IT problems in the past and I don't want to run out of battery on my phone, and I also don't want to enhance my relationship with my phone by improving its memory. So we're gonna try to keep this quick. I'm not gonna go too much in depth into any book. Those books that I do love, you will see them again and again and again and again until you will probably have a more elaborate idea of what I think about them or of the book themselves. In fact, the ones at the very top will probably be books that I at some point give an individual video if I haven't already. Now, number 10 is divided between 2 books that I don't know what to think about because they didn't move me much. One of them, this one, it's the reason why I'm having to make this video for the second time, because for some reason, some stupid reason that I'm actually gonna fix right now, I wrote my password in front of in the cover of this book. I wrote my password to almost everything. It's a password I have, and in the video I was making before I showed you the book, and then I saw that I had that password written there, so obviously I cannot post that because it would take too much time to change that password because I've put it in so many places I no longer remember. So I have to make it again, and that's the reason why I cannot show you the front cover of this book. Or maybe I could, just doing like this. We're talking about the Endless War. No, the Forever War, sorry. The Forever War. This is from Joe Haldeman. It's a good book. I started reading it after DNFing Black Lamb, Grey Falcon by Rebecca West. I didn't DNF that book because I didn't love it. I did love it. But the summer is a tricky time for me because it's high season. I'm doing a million things. And sometimes reading kind of takes a backseat for a while. And a thick book in the summer tends to not go well with me, although it's precisely the time when I would love to read long books, but I am so busy. Normally it's leisure time for most people, and because I'm servicing those people, it's not leisure time for me. So yeah, I took this book because it seemed simpler than the other one, and also shorter, hoping that if I would have the experience that I had with other sci-fi books that I had been reading this year. It wasn't the case. This book really left me unmoved. I couldn't put point the finger at the reason why, and this is why it's still on the list, because it felt like a really good book of science fiction. The title tells you pretty much all you need to know about it, that and that it is science fiction. But I'm just I think it's one of those books that it had, you know what book I had the same thing with? The Great Gatsby by Phil Gerards, which is a book that I can see why it's good. Somehow I was left unmoved as well. Didn't care at all. Didn't get through my skin. Not that they are too similar or anything like that, but I did love the movie compared to the book. And this is another case of that. So maybe if you've read it, you can tell me what you thought. Another book that it's also number 10, and I decided to share this spot with 2 books that I could appreciate, but that I didn't care much for, was Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. A bit different. This has many more chances of being redeemed because the writing of Amor Towles was remarkable. It felt like an instant classic. The moment I was reading it, I was surprised to find out that it was so recent. But the story was a bit disappointing because I am very interested in non-traditional relationships, and this is a three-way relationship between a number of characters, and two women and one guy. And I believe that one of them at least was an anthropologist or something like that. So when I read the synopsis, I was so interested. I thought the conversations were going to be amazing, probably was going to be super subversive. At the end, it felt like the most cliche book written about sort of like that type of relationships for people who've never experienced them. And I just like the writing and the prose was the only thing I could really appreciate from it. The plot was good, but it was good in such a sort of like formal, predictable way that I just couldn't care. But perhaps it's because it's it's fictionalized in a world that I know very well, and I think it could be done better. I think it could be done in a much more revealing way, and it could go much further in many ways. But it wasn't really about that relationship either. It was like at the end of the day, the relationship itself was very uneven in the sense of how each character felt toward each other, and there is something that happens in there in there's a car crash. I'm not saying who's affected or anything like that, but in some way or other it affects everyone's relationship and commitment toward each other. And I'm not going to say much because I'm going to end up spoiling, and I know some of you care about that for some reason. But it was a good book, and I would recommend it. And I think to 99% of people who I recommended that book, they would love it. Just not for me. Perhaps because it's something that I many times thought about writing in a completely different way. And yeah, that's all I can say. Number 9 is Letter to the Father from Kafka. This is a very short book, and it's a letter. That's probably why it's so low on the list, because it's actually amazing. It's very emotional, very beautifully written. It's Kafka. What else to say? Amazing. I recommend it. And I mean, like, this would take you what? I don't know how fast you read, but this would take you very short time. The next book is Ismail Kadare, the Dusk of the Gods of the Steppe. That's my guess of how you would call this book. Ismail Kadare is the most important, or one of the most important writers of, I think, the Czech Republic, but I am not so sure. Somebody who is Czech, please now insult me in the comments. As you can see, I tend to prepare my videos very well. I care much for the output, and I have a group of script writers behind the cameras, making sure that I don't make a mistake at any point. Whatever. In any case, this is a good book. It's Ismail Kadare. You can look there in Google Translate to find the English title. It was well written. The theme, which is in itself, I think, a spoiler that I shouldn't be talking about, but through the title you could decipher what's sort of like this theme, this sort of like subtext. There's a symbolical. It gives some symbolical depth to the book itself. It was probably my favorite thing about it. But it was pretty uneventful, and not in a way that it was meaningful like another book on the list, actually probably the next, not the next, but close. But it was just like, this character in the same place in, I think, Denmark or Russia, I don't remember either, in which it was the author of Dr. Zhivago, another book I didn't care much for, and yes, it was him dating women and wanting to tell this story. And that's what makes the book good, right? Is that, like, he's always telling these legends and stories, and finally when he manages to tell it, it's like to the woman that he has chosen. And so it's well written. But I don't know, like, it's normally a book like this, books like this I read all the time. A book like this normally in any other year wouldn't make it to this list. This would be just the book that stayed out, and from here on you would get the books that are actually my best books of the year. It's just that this year I read a lot of books like this, but worse. This book is actually really good, and I think this is a very important author if you are interested in knowing, like, an important author from a country that is not your own. This might be a really good introduction to him, because it's also political commentary, talks about propaganda. There's a lot more here than just that story. So it's, I guess it's subjective in this case. My indifference toward it. And the next book on the list is one I don't have. Is the Temple of the Golden Babilon. I don't know where I put it. This book was like, it took me a long time to finish, and I don't know why, because I was enjoying every page. Every time I opened it, it was amazing. I love the reflections in it. I love the way Mishima writes. It's number 7 because I'm starting to see a theme with Japanese writers in general, and I can see why a particular kind of adolescent male adult tends to love Japanese writing in general, or Japanese art in general. And that's as much clues as I will give you about my opinion on what that is, and what does it have to say about, like, at least masculine Japanese culture. But it is, even here, even in a book that is a lot more or perhaps precisely because it's a book that is a lot more transcendental than others, like the sailor who fell from grace with the sea. It's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore that aspect. That sort of, like, yeah, whatever. Some people, like, really, like, are devoted to Mishima's figure, and then as a person, I think I'm not, like, at all. I think it's an interesting person, but in the same way that, like, I don't know, other characters I don't identify with could be interesting people. Like, I don't think of, I don't know, Bobby Fischer, the chess player, and I think, oh my god, I love Bobby Fischer, the person. No, it's an interesting person, but, like, already, if not for his biography, which should be enough to keep you from idealizing Mishima, from his writing, you can see that, like, his world in many ways was very small, very deep and very intense, but very small. But that's because it was, like most of these great figures, is like their world was themselves. So there's, I guess that's a little rant there just for you, but I don't want that to, like, scare you away from the fact that the book was amazing, that Mishima writes incredibly well, that this is a story about a boy obsessed with a temple and with the idea of beauty, and going from becoming the biggest devotee of beauty to his greatest enemy, is a book that you should read. It's probably my second book ever read based on a monastery, after The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, which is a superior book in every way. But this book is shorter, is more intense, is a much easier read, is Mishima, which is interesting in itself, the way he writes and all of that. And the ending, not the plot twist at the ending, because it's not a plot twist, it's building up to it, so I wouldn't call it a plot twist, right? It's just the dramatic action at the end. It's not something unpredictable, but the way the character does it and the way he reacts to having done it is something I did not predict, and it's something that makes the book so much better. So it's a book I would recommend, and I think it's a book that, like, you can really not, you can't go wrong. There's nothing wrong with the book. It's just really good. I enjoyed it a lot. The character can be, of course, irritating many times. My partner was very irritated by the main character. I wasn't so much, but I think, like, it's because it's a good, it's well made. Yeah, nothing to say about this book in particular that is not good, actually. That being said, another book that I have, like, mixed feelings about is the Tartar Step by Dino Buzzati. This book I hated for a little bit. Like, the first half of the book, I was kind of like, this is gonna be like one of those unbearable pieces of, like, meta literature, just trying to get me bored, like the movie Satan Tango. I haven't read the book of Satan Tango, but the movie Satan Tango, which is like, yeah, okay. So the end of the movie is that I did, like, the conclusion to the movie Satan Tango is that I wasted 7 hours, and that is actually the purpose of the movie, and therefore it's good. I don't think so. But with this book, it's not the case. This book is actually, like, it's required and it's necessary that the book feels slow and a little bit like, so, like, circling over the same thing. That's sort of like waiting, kind of like waiting for Godot, for the end of the book to make sense. And the conclusion at the end of the book is so contrary, so different from my worldview. I am a goal-oriented person, And I believe that if you are not doing what you want to do, you are wasting your time. I believe that there is such a thing as wasting your life. I believe that there is such a thing as like making a mistake. I believe that there is such a thing as like fucking not doing anything and not being even worth, not making your life worth living. Like, I believe that exists, and this book, in a sense, it defends something else. It defends that like you can never be defeated in the existential battle of existence. That's very redundant, but whatever. Because whatever your quest might be, the final enemy will be the same for everyone, and we will all face it on a unique way, and that makes your life worth it in itself, because the pattern of your motion throughout this realm, not to I'm not when I say realm, I don't mean that there is other realms. I just mean this realm, the one that we have get access to, is your own piece of art, and you can make it of any shape. My question is, if you can make it of any shape, why would you make it like of the shape of like waiting somewhere and just being like doing not what you want to do and blah, 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 like the same there for everybody. Obviously the story here is relatively original, because it's this character who's like trapped in this castle in which he's supposed to wait for an army, a Tartar army that is supposed to come or not come, and I cannot spoil to you the ending, but the point is that it's okay. The point of the book is it's okay, like it's okay if you didn't get to do the big thing at the end, and I don't think that's true. I think it's not okay. I mean, it's okay in a way, in a way, both things are true. You shouldn't take anything too seriously because you're gonna die, and just take everything very fucking serious because you are gonna die. And I tend to behave like my output, my energy is as if I believed in the former, but I actually believe on the latter. Very good book, and as it made me ruminate a lot because I don't agree with it, and because although I don't agree with it, it felt hard to deny its power, the power of the last few pages on the context of the whole book. So I highly, highly recommend it. There you go, Tstep by Dino Buzzati. Hiroshima, Your Hersey, also a very, very interesting book. I'm not sure if I completed this book by reading it or if I swapped into an audiobook, because I saw that I have it also on my audiobook on my Audible library. So in however way I did finish this book, I definitely processed it. I loved it. Journalism, it feels like it's a non-fiction, but it's fictionalized in a way because it feels very prosaic. You are there, you're involved with the characters, it gives you a lot of perspective, it humanizes the victims and everybody, and it's just incredible. It was short, and I read it because Steve recommended it, and his best books of all time, I think. His argument was that this book stopped, I think, the Cold War from becoming something else, probably. I think it's a book that is urgent to reread now, to be more aware of what we might be facing very soon, or perhaps to keep it from happening if the right person reads it at the right time. But without being too pessimistic, I don't think that a book nowadays has anymore the social impact that it used to have, not unless it becomes an adaptation of a movie, because people doesn't read. But yeah, it's number 5, and I think it deserves that spot. I liked it, I enjoyed it. I don't think it's a book I would reread because I think it's a very easy book to process. But it's definitely a book that I would recommend to many people, and I would even read aloud to somebody if they couldn't read. That's number 5. Number 4, my second favorite science fiction book of the year, Brian Aldiss's Hot House. I loved this book like a lot when I finished it, and now I'm not so sure of how much, because after very recently a couple of friends read it, and one of them loved it like with her whole heart, and the other one hated it like with incisive intensity, like so much, and it made me think a lot about the book and reflect on it and revisit it a little bit. And I realized that there is some flaws in this book. The main flaw for me is that the characters, there's not much character development, not in the way that you would want it to be, and that the plot is very casual. Like, the world building is better and at least more original and more unique than any other world building I've ever seen in any book, and only that makes it worth reading. But because that world building is so amazing, and some parts of the plot are so genius, sometimes it does feel like it doesn't use its whole potential. This book could be so much more than it was. But also that's part of its charm, because it's a book that is not taking itself too seriously. It's just a fun ride. It's a very fun ride, and because of that, I have to recommend it, regardless of my two friends, Brian Aldiss Hot House. The book that I do love the most in terms of sci-fi from this year is City by Clifford D. Simak, which as of now is my second favorite sci-fi book. Perhaps very soon is going to become number 3, because I'm reading Blindside at the moment by Peter Watts, and that's very I'm loving it. But City by Clifford D. Simak is a perfect book. There's nothing wrong with it. It has everything, really. Like, it has dogs, it has history, it has reflections. It's not pretentious at all. You almost are surprised that it's so philosophical, because it feels so fun and so almost like it's playful in a when I say childish way, I mean it in the best possible meaning. It's just like it's a book that likes itself, and it's hard not to like it. And although it's supposed to be somber, because it has a somber ending and everything, it didn't feel like that to me. Although the ending, there's two endings, because the author wrote another ending after a while, after years after having written it. It's like, there's a lot of reflections here on, like, the apocalyptic connotations of history and humanity, and on theology and our relationship to religion and memory, and all of those things don't have very positive conclusions. But the book itself, it's hard not to read it as a book rather than as reality, although it is a reflection on our world, because it's just such a book. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like I love it. I love it, and I think it's the ultimate best possible science fiction book to recommend to people who has never read science fiction, because it has everything that science fiction can have in the best possible way. Way better than any Isaac Asimov book that I was recommending until now to people. Yeah, I don't know how much more time I have, so I'm gonna have to rush a little bit, and that's gonna be hard, because now the two best are coming. That was number 3 on my list, and this is number 2. This would have been number 1 in any other year of my life, except for 2022 when I read Moby Dick. I fucking love this book. I especially loved the beginning and the ending, because it was were the reflections of life, mortality, and memory, and the meaninglessness or meaningfulness of human life, a lie. And these are fictionalized memoirs from the Emperor Hadrian, and by her obsessed author and historian Margaret Usener. And it's a wonderful book. It creates a whole world out of a man, and then you see it and you realize that the man is yourself. Like, this is it's in as many ways an anatomy of humans, of many. At least it was hard not to read this and feel identified with the more personal, intimate reflections. Obviously not with the biographical aspects as much as I would love to be a Roman emperor, I guess. And on top of all of that, it was translated by Julio Cortázar, which it's very relevant if you're reading this in Spanish, because it just felt right. It just felt right. Like, the Cortázar was the right translator for this book, for sure. Like, for sure. I'm not gonna say much more. It's not a book that can be spoiled, but it's also a book that is hard to talk about like in 2 minutes. So, highly recommend it. It's amazing. It's a book that if you read, it will stay with you. It's not a book that you will forget ever. At least that's how it feels to me. The Memoirs of Hadrian by Margaret Usener. And number 1, I don't have it because I read it on a PDF, compulsively, obsessively, all the E's that you can imagine, after having watched the movie, the play. It's Hamlet by Shakespeare. I watched the movie in 1948, the black and white one. I want to watch the other one as well, the Ken Burrow one. I think many people recommended me that one as well. And I want to watch all the adaptations of this play, because I watched that one and I loved it, and I basically look at the PDF and I read the whole thing because I wanted to pick all the monologues and dialogues and sentences that I felt like I could fucking tattoo on my skin. It's full with them. It's completely fertile and fecund in every way and ideas and all of that. And and I wanted to memorize also the speech from To Be or Not to Be. Maybe someday if I do it, I'll definitely make a video doing my own interpreted version of how that would look. It's if there is two more plays of Shakespeare that I like as much as this one, then his collected works, the Brown famous book of his collected works, I will probably become one of my favorite books of all time. Because this is so close to being by itself. It feels like the Odyssey, but with so much more drama and so much more like relatable drama. I have to say. I don't know. It was amazing. It was amazing. It's an incredible book. I don't know how much more time I have. I think I'm gonna run out of memory anytime soon, so I'm not gonna say much more. Probably by 2025 I will have read all Shakespeare, so I will be able to talk about it in depth. There's a book that you probably can see conspicuously that has been excluded. That's because the books that have become my favorite books of my life, I decided to exclude from the best of the 2024 list, because I will make a separate video this year for sure. I know I say that. I know I say this at the beginning of every year, but this time it's true. I will make a list of like my favorite books of all time, and the book that I excluded from this list is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, which is now perhaps my favorite novel of all time. I have to see, because it's hard to decide between that one and Moby Dick. There's many other books that are on that list, and my favorite book of all time is not War and Peace, but it's definitely one of them. That being said, I think it's time for me to go before the camera chooses, for the phone chooses by itself when I should go. So yeah, thank you for everything. For everything, like just for listening, but also for the books, because many of these books I have read because of you, and that's a lot. You never know how much you can influence somebody just by recommending a book. In my case, a lot. That being said, have a nice day, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you, BookTube.